This show was haphazard, so we're live now.
Yo,
So this is the Summit Show, and I didn't even check which episode it is. I'll edit that into the show later. I kind of randomly had the idea today. I was talking to Corey, and I said, "Yo, man, why don't you come on the Summit Show so we can talk about Modbap Modular and the new module? The new module being Osiris." And so let me just give a brief introduction. I am Flux of fluxwithit.com, and with me now is Corey of Modbap Modular and beatpeople.com. You may know Corey from, we co-host Beat People together, and we've been friends for a really long time, as evident by the grayness in your beard.
fucking.
And so Corey, why don't you start off by telling people who may not be familiar with you a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So yeah, I'm Corey. As Ken said, some may know me as B-Boy Tech. I run B-Boy Tech Report and beatpeople.com. We got the Beat People podcast has been going on for a little while now, and just last year I launched Modbap Modular to start to bring a couple modules to market. So that's what's up.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of set a few things up, and I'll just say for people who come to watch this stream later on, just know that this is a live stream. We usually have people come into the chat. We're gonna, talk to the people in the chat room as well. Taking questions, that sort of thing. But because this wasn't previously scheduled like normally I would say like, okay, it's definitely going to be on a Sunday, it's definitely going to be at this time, and I give people advance. I didn't do that today. I was like, you know what, I haven't done a show in a minute, and Corey's got an awesome new module, so let's check it out. So first thing I want to do is I've got this other view here that I pulled up, and I was going to set it up better, but again, haphazard. So
we're off the cuff today.
Exactly. So I've got an Osiris sitting right there next to the Mordax data. And yeah, Corey, why don't we start off with just a very kind of broad perspective on what Osiris is?
So yeah, okay. So Osiris is a wavetable oscillator. But I call it the Bi-Fidelity wavetable oscillator because it has this fidelity functionality on it where it runs, the module in general runs at 96 kilohertz, but I've put this fidelity knob on it so you could dial it in, make it lo-fi, and then you could dial it in and make it even trashy, but it's not just kind of like a bit reduction on the output. It's actually introducing jitter to the waveform and, a few other things. But yeah, so it's a wavetable oscillator that you can scan 2 dimensions, X and Y. It has 4 banks on it. Each bank has 32 wavetables with 32 waveforms in each wavetable. So that's 32 by 32 wavetables with 2-dimensional scanning. But you have 4 banks of that, which is a total of 4,900 or 4,096 potential waveform combinations that you could get out of this thing between the 4 banks. It also has SD card on it, micro SD, so that you can put your own waveforms or wavetables on it, I should say. And yeah, so it also has a sub-oscillator, which is one of the kind of key features of it. Sub-oscillator could be used 2 ways. You could add weight to the main oscillator, or you can throw a sub-volt per octave at it because it does have 2 volts per octave, one for the main oscillator and one for the sub. You could throw a sub-volt per octave at it and have a whole separate melody or bass line going on. So it's a really flexible Bi-Fidelity wavetable oscillator with a sub that is all neatly packed in 12 HP. For me, it kind of simplifies the usage of wavetables, and some wavetable synths can be pretty complicated, and lots of digging around and stuff. And this just kind of has like key components that you want to tweak right there on the panel. Let's go.
So just to talk about some more of the functionality there. You have your own editor for it as well. Do you have the ability to share the screen? Maybe you can pull that up. I can't run it on my computer right now because I'm running ancient technology, waiting for my new MacBook to get here, which I'm very excited about. But one of the cool things about this is the fact that you can import your own wavetables into this, and you can do some really cool stuff with that. I was messing with the module today, and one of the aspects about it that I'm really enjoying is how you can adjust the timbre. So you have an amount of your timbre change, but then you have multiple different selections as far as like whether you're doing wave folding or FM or you know, can you dive into a little bit about the differences between the different timbre modes?
Yeah, so we put 6 timbre modes, and I'll say we. First, let me before I go into the timbre modes, I want to just mention that. So I had this idea. I had some mock-ups. I had several different mock-ups that range from 6 HP all the way to 12 HP, or maybe even 14 HP. And then I knew that I wanted to bring someone in, collaborate with somebody. So I hired Madison, currently of Fours, his own software company, and formerly of Electron. So I kind of had this whole idea that, yo, I want this, and I kind of showed him the mock-up, and I said I want to be able to have this wide swath of sounds, and I also want some form of a processor on it where you have, like, 10 different dials that you can set it on, 10 different types of processing that you can set it on, a wave folding or whatever that you can set it on, and tweak the sound, process the sound. So funny enough, everything that I was talking about, he said, I've been messing with, some wave folding and some FM stuff. And we thought it was a cool idea to kind of introduce FMing and wave folding on a wavetable module, right? So the timbre modes is what that actually became. So the timbre modes are unison, where you can kind of detune the wave a bit. So you can set the timbre mode to unison, and then you can go to the timbre amount, and you can start to dial in this detuned sort of flavor of things, where you can almost get chords, fifths and sevenths or whatever it is, and you can kind of dial that in depending on how much of the timbre you dial in. But the timbre mode has all of these different modes around the dial, and it smoothly morphs through the timbre modes. So those timbre modes are unison, bend, fold, sync, noise. Then you have FMX through FM8. And so each one of those timbre modes is going to give you a different sort of flavor. Like, so right now, I have no timbre coming in. If you can hear that, I'll open this up a bit. And I'm on, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, you can. So I'm actually on detune or unison. And if I use this, I'm dialing in the amount, right? But then I can morph through these timbre modes. So I'm on unison now. Hold on, I'm gonna play this. Let me do this. So right now I'm on unison. I'm gonna go to bend. That's the next one. Now I'll go to fold. And see how it's smoothly morphing between them. Now I'll go to sync. Now I'll go to noise. And FM. And then you have FM 1 through 8. So as you go from about 1 o'clock on that knob, as you go from about 1 o'clock, you get into the FM mode. So then you go all the way. And so it's basically the wave table is FM in itself. And it gets more tame at FM1, and then as you go around, it gets there's more modulation in it, so you get different tones, and then you could dial that up. Right. So, and obviously it's a wavetable, so you can start to scroll through the waveforms on that current wavetable, and all of this is modulatable. So yeah, that's the timbre modes, which extremely extends the possibilities, the capabilities of what you can do.
So yeah, one of the other aspects about the timbre on there with that fidelity knob, we were talking earlier before the show, a good while earlier today, we were talking about the fact that with the fidelity knob, so during development, we talked about this a bit, where you said you wanted to have it be lo-fi and hi-fi at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to you about what S was kind of doing to the waveforms, and you had mentioned to me that this was so you had the idea before bringing S in on this, and then when you started talking with S, it was interesting because you were like, well, S actually already had something similar like in mind and was kind of already working towards this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit about how you two's minds combined for the fidelity aspect of it?
Yeah. So I was saying, like, being Modbap, I kind of want to introduce some sort of boom bap or lo-fi something into everything that I do. And so with this, I was like, I want to introduce this sort of lo-fi. I want to have a lo-fi knob on it. But at the same time, I didn't necessarily want it to just be, firstly, what I'd done before on Performer. Performer has a 12-bit and an 8-bit sort of crusher. And while they sound good, I didn't just want it to be bit crushing. And so I was like, I want to sort of dial in this or have this ability to do some lo-fi stuff on there. And he was like, well, I've been working on this algorithm, and I played with this algorithm. Well, he wasn't working on it at the moment, but he had done it sort of before, just to kind of play with it. Like, you know what I mean? He had sort of an idea, and he was imitating, taking a soft synth that he was designing. He was imitating like Amiga, the sound of Amiga, the lo-fi sound of Amiga, which back in the day was dope, and some people might even think it was sort of trashy or whatever, but it had a sound. Then, and all of those things back then, the technology was what it was, but it had a sound. And what we talked about is that the Amiga, I guess it had some sort of wave scanning, and also because it was on a computer and the way the screen would scan and interfere or somehow interact with the waveforms, it would introduce sample jitter into the waveforms, and it would introduce like some bit reduction or sample rate reduction and that kind of stuff. And so he was like, I was working on sort of imitating that. And I was like, oh, that sounds dope. And he said, I'll send you a sample of like what it sounds like. And when he sent it to me, I was like, boom, that's it. That we got to do that in this module. And so it's funny because a lot of that kind of stuff, I can honestly say I don't necessarily, what I was trying to do wasn't necessarily a wavetable oscillator, but as we talked about what my idea was and what he had already been sort of messing with and capable of in how he programs and what he's been programming, it just kind of landed that, this would be a wavetable oscillator. And so that lo-fi thing was sort of that. Now, that's just the idea of the lo-fi, but I really wanted it to have this sort of duality where it could be hi-fi and people didn't have to have it as lo-fi, because I know that everybody's not doing lo-fi house, lo-fi hip-hop and all of that sort of thing. So I wanted to make it, something viable for people that do other kind of music, right? Or just one of the more pristine things. So we set it as 96 kilohertz. And when we were testing it from a software perspective, it sounded so good. And I was like, damn, this really is sounding good. And this is through the months of testing. And then when we finally, did the firmware and ported it to the hardware, the initial sort of prototype hardware, it lost some fidelity. And I was like, it's not it wasn't bad, but it just wasn't as pristine as it was when I was messing with it on the software. We were testing it on the software. So we decided to set it at 96 kilohertz because I think may have been running my computer DAW at that or higher. I don't know. And so we decided, okay, so as we do the firmware, we'll set it at 96 kilohertz, but we'll also have that fidelity knob there. And it wasn't until like a week or two before I announced it that I even came up with the terminology of Bi-Fidelity, because to me, that piece is so important to the personality of this module.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about the terms because I remember you were like, you had a different term. I forget what it was. And we were both like, no, like that's not quite right. And I was like, I remember you said you were like, well, what would you call it?
Yeah.
I was like, Bi-Fidelity, like that.
Yeah. And it was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. And so because I wanted it to really live this sort of dual life of like, you could do that, but you don't have to do it. But I also, because of the way Osiris is a smooth oscillator, what I mean by that is every parameter smoothly morphs around the knob. Like I used to love the idea of, when you use Moog synthesizers and you could go from one waveform to another. It's not a switch. In some senses, like, you just change the waveform. Now you're messing with that waveform, or you know what I mean? But with Moog synthesizers, there's always been this sort of more
not always because I know we're gonna get nitpickers in here that are gonna be like, no.
Well, at least the ones that I've used, I love that aspect of being able to morph between waveforms, and so I wanted to kind of touch on that. And so with the Bi-Fidelity piece, I wanted that sort of way, because it was already, we were going in that direction with the timbre modes, where you could smoothly morph between timbre modes. With the sub, you could smoothly morph between the waveforms. And so I was like, I don't just want a button. I'm going to make it a knob so that you can morph around and add as much or as little of that fidelity sort of flavor as you want.
So with that being said, in the discussions with S and how you set it up with him, was there like a setting where he was like, okay, this is that Amiga setting or whatever, you know what I mean? Like when the knob is at this position, we're like full bore on exactly what that is. And then because you can go way past that. So when you go past 12 o'clock, like what we were talking about, it goes into a whole other territory.
It does. And that was also purposeful too. No, we didn't talk about what that setting is, but from what I remember, the initial sample of that sound that he gave me, it's about 12 o'clock on that knob. So right about at 12 o'clock.
Which is funny because that's what I was saying to you earlier. Didn't I?
Yeah. You were like, I love it right about at 12 o'clock, or, just before 12 o'clock.
Yep.
That's crazy, because that's where I often use it. But I also know that, again, I want to make something that more people than just like our tribe is into, you know what I mean? And so like I also, as I was listening to that, and I did a lot of like meticulous sort of listening and testing to that particular feature. And then at 6 o'clock, it was about what it was going to be. It was as dangerous as it was going to get. So we actually went from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock on that knob, and we, made it more noisy and more aggressive. You know what I mean? And so, so when you get past 12 o'clock, you're starting to get into, some really sort of low fidelity stuff. But then by the time you get past 3 o'clock on that knob, you're in like a really aggressive place.
Yeah. It could, and what was cool is like that was when we were talking, it was really mostly initial impression stuff, because I pretty much just got it fairly recently, and we had been talking about it for a while, so I knew what a lot of the functionality was, and I knew where things were going to be, and like what the idea behind each knob was, and that sort of thing. But I hadn't had a chance to lay hands on it and move things around myself. So with immediate initial impressions, I was like, oh, okay, well, like this right here, like this sound is like, it immediately spoke to me for the type of music that I make. And what's interesting about that is So within our group of friends, we kind of all have our sound, right?
Yep.
And I tend to be a bit rougher and, you know, more like just he's dirty. He's dirty.
He's dirty.
Corey has a very smooth, arpeggiated
Yeah.
delay monster sound, right? Joe is like super clean. Like Joe's got that clean but warm vibe about him. You know what I mean? So like we all have our tones. But it's funny because there's like this across us all, regardless of that, there is this common ground where we can be like, that's the sound that is our sound, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
when you get to it, it's
Know it.
instantly like, oh, okay, that's it right there. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to fiddle with too much. It was just like, you know, I think with the base firmware, I want to say with X and Y both all the way down, it's basically a sine wave, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And yeah, so when you turn that knob up, you're hearing kind of like clinically exactly what it's doing to it. So
Mhm.
like when you turn it up, you hear it at that point, and it's very like the character becomes very apparent because
Yeah.
it's, you know, you're working with it with a sine wave, and then you start playing with that timbre knob, and it's
And then
just
it starts opening up like that.
yeah.
You know, it's interesting because the thing about that is it's not the typical, like when I was demoing it at NobCon, I remember someone said, "Oh, bit crushing," and I was like, "Nah, not really." You know what I mean? There's more to it than bit crushing, right? So, and I think that might be a common thing that people might think, but we really kind of put a little more into like what that is going to sound like, and so that it's more than bit crushing, and that it's musical, and that where you want it to be, it's subtle but noticeable. You know what I mean? And then where you want it to be, it can be aggressive. So we really kind of thought that whole thing through. And I
That
remember
becomes a common misconception when people talk like especially laymen or people who maybe are I don't even wanna say people who just got into it because I see a lot of, like, old heads that say the same thing, but
Mhm.
it's just people who don't get into the technicalities of the music they create will
Yeah,
often just blanket statements say bit crushing about the types of sounds that we're after, and generally speaking, I would say probably 9 out of 10 times, people who say bit crushing are not talking about bit crushing.
yeah, yeah.
You
No,
know what I mean?
no doubt, no doubt.
Like 9 out of 10 times you're just like, "Oh, okay, well, like, I know what you mean." It's like when people say 808s, like,
Yeah, yeah, and
it gets under the skin of
no,
those of us who, like, know the
know
technicalities, but
what's
we're
up.
like, "You
Yeah,
don't like, that's not the word that you wanna use." But it just
and I
becomes
think
part of vernacular.
yeah, and it's because it's easy to associate it to what you know, right? And I think as people spend some time with this module and with that fidelity feature, they'll start to know the characteristic of it and realize. And even I think it was Jeremy from Red Means Recording, when he had it on the scope and he was messing with the fidelity knob, you could see that it was, you know, he said, "Oh, quantizing," right? Like, but you could see that it was adding that sample jitter, and it was, you know, doing different things to the waveform. So it's really applying it to the waveform. It's not necessarily just something on the output that kills the bits. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's actually, just you mentioning words in my ADD brain, which I don't use that term lightly. I'm actually ADD, uh, for people who get upset about it. So quantize, let's get to that because you actually have a quantize feature on the module.
Mhm.
So can we talk a little bit about one, why that's there, and two, how you see use cases for it?
Well, you know, it really is about how I'd been performing and tuning the stupid oscillators is a pain. You know what I mean? And so then there would be times when, you know, you get through it. Whatever it is you're doing, you're tuning it. But then too, there's a lot of times when I'm making stuff with uh the force, and if I'm making stuff with the force, I want to recall things and kind of get back to things, and then, you know, you read over the oscillators, and I don't use a quantizer module because I don't have space for it. I do have space for it, but in my performance rack, it's like a premium. You know what I mean? So at any rate, I wanted to do something where I could just jump around through, you know, the notes and the keys or whatever. So what that was just about making it ease of use. You know what I'm saying? So having a quantized button there so that I can go around and jump through, you know, semitones and stuff. It just kind of made it make sense. And then two, because the sub and the main oscillators sort of follow the quantization, the pitch and the pitch quantization, like you could easily just make a B section with even the same melody just by dropping it down to, you know, the next semitone or whatever it might be. So that was important to me, just to kind of have that. And it was one of those things too, it's easy enough and small enough to throw a button on there that does that. And so that if you're the type of person that never wants to do that, well, you never have to touch that button. It's fine. But if you want it, you could just hit that and it easily. And so I have it quantized. Oh, is this off?
The camera's down.
Let's see. There it is.
There we
So
go.
on the pitch, I have it quantized with this button right here. And it's just easier to kind of jump through, right? But if I had it here, and that may be right for, you know, depending on what you want to do. But I just like having that. It's just a convenience thing. It was really just about the convenience factor, especially thinking about performing and having it be really performative, that you just got a little bit extra stuff that you can do.
So I wanna kind of jump all the way across again, ADD brain, to the fact of development time for this one. I feel like, you know, knowing you personally, I feel like the development time on this one was a lot shorter than Performer. Can you talk about how the development went for this module and just kind of like a little generalistic timeline?
Yeah. So kind of even going back to Performer, I initially wanted to do 3 modules fresh out the gate, like super lofty, ambitious, right? And it didn't happen that way. And I was like, all right, well, I think the right thing to do is first time out the gate, let's do 1 module. Choose the one that's going to be the most unique thing that I might have right now in my sort of design mock-ups and stuff. And that's why I went with Performer. So 2019, I started development of Performer, maybe September or so of 2019. Even though I kind of had talked about it with developers and stuff months before that. So we probably started about 2019. Then it was slow going. It was just a matter of like really dialing in these specs. What is it that I want this thing to do? So 2019, 2020 came, the pandemic hit and things started slowing down. So I guess all in all, that took a year because it came to market in October of 2020. And I probably started September of 2019. And then, so by the time January came around, I was talking to S about, yo, I've decided that my next module is going to be this, right? And I want to bring you on board to collaborate on it. And so we started talking in January of 2020, and we got started in February. And I have to say that I think we had something that pretty closely resembles what this thing is today by March or April, maybe April. But then we did a lot of dialing in and tweaking and, you know, really like just really digging in.
Yeah, I knew that there was definitely a lot of tweaking going on.
Yeah, there was a ton of tweaking. And so I think by the time June came, it pretty much was what it needed to be. And then at that point, maybe May or whatever, it pretty much was what we needed to be. But we had taken it as far as we could from a software perspective, and now it's time to put together the hardware. So went back and developed the hardware according to the spec, and then through the summer, we kind of married the two, the firmware and the hardware, and kind of did lots of, and it was weird because development is weird in a sense where you'll have like, you did all that time developing the firmware, then you do the time now you're going to marry the firmware and the hardware, and then there's a lull. Right, and there's a lull, then all of a sudden some week will come and there'll be 5 different betas of the firmware in that week, and it all is because like, yo, we made all the changes that we wanted to make. Now in testing, yo, this thing is kind of weird. Okay, tweak that and send another one. Yo, now this thing is good, but this thing is kind of weird. Tweak that and send another. Then S might say like, yo, to hell with that sub. Like he'll be like, yo, that sub is not gonna work, and I'm like, that's what I'm saying, right? Like, so it was a real like volley back and forth, and then we would look up and it'd be like, there'd be 1 week where it was 5 or 6 different firmware versions, beta firmwares, and then we would kind of live with that a little bit, and then we got it to a point where it was ready to be shown. So I'll say if we started in February, all together, like right up until NobCon, we were working on the thing. So what, however many months that is, 5-6 months. So it's February to, that's the 2nd month to the 9th month. So 7 months.
And the NobCon push was a significant push too.
Yeah, it was huge. That was my first time exhibiting as a manufacturer. And I knew that it, obviously if this is going to be the time that we announce it, it had to be ready to go. And then we reached some other things, right? So it pushed it back a month, but still I was able to show it and have it in pretty much its final form and really dig in. Now I will say we had other delays that kind of delayed us for that month. But what it did is it gave me a moment to look and say, yo, let's tweak this. Since we got a little time, let's tweak this thing or that thing. And so we were really able to dial it in. And then, about the sub, with the development of the sub, that was such a big thing for me too, because I said, yo, I want to be able to use the sub as a separate baseline. So that was part of the original spec. But the sound of the sub is always, what are you trying to do? When I told S, like, yo, I want to be able to get the same sort of sub bass out of this thing that I would with any synth that I use, and I use a lot of Moog synths or whatever. And he was like, well, I don't know what to he's like, what you just what how are we gonna do that? You know what I mean? But we were able to do it, and we really played with the waveforms for that sub oscillator. So that was another thing that kind of took the development a little time, because I even changed the order of the waveforms on the sub, because as I was doing testing, I noticed that if I went and I used my ears, so I just went straight to my synths that I like to use, and I started recording stuff and then looking at it on the scope and saying like, you know what, I kind of am not partial to the sine or the square. I'm sort of partial to combination waves or composite waveforms, if that's what it's called, like where there's a blend of square and sine, or
where it's a bit skewed and
it's a bit skewed and stuff, and you get a blend of the triangle and the sine. So that's the reason, even so that goes to the meticulous nature of how we develop this, even down to the order of the waveforms on the sub, like was tweaked several times so that I could get those sort of composite waveforms and layering and overlapping.
And leaving the space to kind of have other people doing what they do. You know what I mean? Like you can do the traditional stuff, but if you want that Modbap sound, like, like there's these in-between places that are not fiddly to get to. And that's one of the big things about why I had to cuss you out earlier. Because
well, which time?
Exactly. So Corry basically made Performer too good, and now I'm like, well, now I gotta sell some gear so that I can buy more of the same module, because I want it here, but I also want it here, and I want it here, so I Yeah, so now I need multiple. And Corey knows that, like, if I want something, if I really like a piece of gear, I
That's
either love it or I
hate it.
want two of them. I either
Oh, it's that. There's extremes. Well, see, that's the thing. I feel like that's the
either
crowning glory of a good module for Ken. If he wants two of them, it's a home run.
yeah.
Like,
Yep.
because he'll know right away. Like, Ken will be like, yo, I got the ER301. I can't stop messing with the ER301. Yo, I want two ER301s. It's like, yo, they ain't even had a week anniversary yet. What do you?
Yeah, man. So and that's kind of the thing though, is about the reason why I bring that up is just because one of the reasons why I like it is, one, it has the sound that I like to use, but there's no fiddliness. Like,
Mhm.
it's just, you can immediately use these things to get the sound that you want, and you don't feel like you're lost in menus. You don't feel like you're behind like 5 layers of whatever to get to it. It's just like, oh, like, I want this sound, boom, I'm there. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And the Osiris is like, as I start tweaking it, as I start getting to know it, I'm like, oh, well, like, yeah, I want this kind of timbre to go high pitch, but I don't want it to get too thin. And it's
Mhm.
like, well, there's the sub. Like,
Yeah,
that it's one of the great things about it, because wavetables are so easy to make sound thin, and then
yeah,
people are
yeah.
like, "Oh, there's no
They're
bass in
brittle in
this."
nature, right? Like, and I think I mentioned it to you when I was doing sound design on these wavetables, and after a while, it just kind of feels like you're in an all white room with white lights on. Like everything is same, same, same. It feels like that as you're designing the things. And then so that was a huge part of it too. I was happy to see that the sub that I had decided to put the sub in there from the get-go, because as I got into the nature of designing the waveforms or the wavetables, I was like, boy, some of these really need the sub to fatten them up. You know what I mean? But you'll like, it's like I'll like the timbre or the tone or the, you know, whatever that wave table is bringing, but then it's just you need like a sine wave underneath or a square wave underneath, or even just to have the same thing
Well,
drop
and
an
that's
octave.
also one of the things, is that the way that the waveforms of the sub can kind of marry into the wavetable is so, it's so nice, to where you can, where you can daisy chain it, and it's all in the same volt per octave in the same module,
Mhm.
that sometimes you won't even notice that you're hearing the sub, right? So, like, you'll just be like, "Oh, it's just, this just sounds good," right? And
Yeah.
then you go and turn the sub down, and you're like,
Oh.
"Oh, wow, this thing is like, it's really thin. Like, I'm getting all this up top sound." But
Mhm.
then when you bring that sub back in, you're like, "Oh, there's the body." So you've got this big bodied waveform, but it has this interesting character up top,
Yeah.
which is something that you often have to do two of in another synth. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm programming sounds on a Hydrosynth, for instance, a lot of the times I'll use the third oscillator in the same way that the sub is used on this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, it's about kind of layering your sound correctly. Now, you could separate it and do all kinds of cool stuff, but a lot of the times I like it to just follow it to keep everything beefy, even though I'm, manipulating FM and doing all kinds of craziness to it.
Yep. You kind of need that foundation. It's something about the foundation, but you're right. There's something about the way, and I'll admit for that, for the way this thing is blended that way, and I know we talked about it a lot, but I don't know exactly what S did in that sense. This sort of, you have sub mix. The sub mix is there on purpose so you can dial in as much of the sub as you want, but the idea that it doesn't sound like there's two separate things happening. These things are married really well, like the main oscillator and the sub just kind of fit together. You don't get the sense that maybe almost like there's somebody playing a bass line underneath with the same notes. You know what I mean? It really just feels like a fatter wavetable.
And if you want to separate it, you can.
Yeah.
That's the other thing,
Okay.
is that like, there's, so as much immediacy as there is there, there's also the fact, I'll change my view here for a second. Oh, apparently that's, why is that doing that? I don't know.
Somebody said it seems like an amazingly fast dev cycle. Yeah, this one was pretty quick. Like I said, like just in a couple months, we had kind of what we wanted. But then that was just for the firmware. Then we had to kind of, you know, dig in and do the hardware and marry. Like after a while, it was just about tweaking the two and making sure that everything kind of functioned together according to the spec and according to the way I wanted it to function. But yeah, it was a relatively quick turnaround. I think most of the development timeline of that 7 months or so was really the tweaking. And what Adagraph, he said, oh, it's all good. It's all good. I got it. I'm just reading some of the comments. Adagraph said, yo, I appreciate you for adding the sub. Yeah, man, that was I'll say, speaking to the statement for adding the sub, that's the key. It wasn't added. It was a part of the original spec, right? Like I knew that I needed that. I wanted that. So but yeah, it's super useful though.
Yeah,
Super
that's one of the things I wanted to say is just the fact that with the way that this is set up, and hopefully I don't get too far from my mic. I'll try to keep it straight. But
I can hear you.
yeah, one of the things about it though is that you have a separate sub output on the module right here.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to process that separately and get a more distinct flavor from it, you can do that. You know what I mean? You can process that separately, and you can also choose to use it as a completely separate oscillator using that the sub volt per octave input. So one of the things that I've been doing with it that I showed you earlier today is just sending melodic voltage to the timbre input so that you can do kind of melodic timbre changes inside of a sequence. What are some of the tips that, and just things that you find yourself doing with the module often?
There's a couple things I'm doing. I will just kind of slam a sub volt per octave patch in there. So like if I'm making, there's a couple things with the sub volt per octave. So if I'm making a beat, I'll have melody going on one CV track, and then I'll create another CV track for the bass, and I'll throw that into the sub volt per octave. So just like you would create any track, you get the drums, you get these chords or whatever you might have, whatever atmospheres and those kinds of things. Then you get your bass line and your melody. So I'll build the track that way, which means I have two separate volts per octave in there, one in the main volt per octave and one in the sub volt per octave. So then I'll play the beat and I'll just snatch the sub volt per octave out of there. So then what's happening is the sub is following the main melody and fortifying, giving some low end to the main melody. And then at a certain point, I'll slam the sub volt per octave patch back into the input, and then it'll just start playing a different bass line. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of crude just to kind of throw a patch in there, but has a bass line playing already. But I think I could probably do something with some switches and some stuff like that of probability, but that is fun. So that's one thing. The other thing is I will just program gates. Like I'll send the sub out to its own envelope, and I'll just program gates where it just opens the envelope sometimes, right? Then what it'll do is it'll kind of follow the main melody, but only open up the bass line part of the melody every now and then, almost like probability, but I'll program those gates in the sequence, right? So then you have this really wild sort of, like for instance, if it's an arp, then you'll have like, bass lines being programmed on every, I don't know, quarter note or whatever it might be. And it really sounds good. And it's actually would make you feel surprised that that's coming out of one module.
I did notice that you added a decay knob to it, right? So there's a VCA in the module, right? And it's opening and closing the module, right? I assume it's just like a digital VCA inside of there that's opening and closing it, right? Tell me a little bit about that aspect of it and why you decided it was important to include a VCA with a decay to it.
I use a lot of plucks because I do use a lot of ARPs. So again, I was kind of thinking about what's convenient for me, really. And I just kind of took it upon myself to think, like, if I use it this way, other people might want to use it that way. And I will say that when I used to use braids, I thought it was convenient to have that VCA in there. So more than anything, I wanted to be able to have the decay so I can drop the decay down and really get some good plucks out of the thing, and even percussive sounds, right? So in order to do that, I didn't want to necessarily have to go and have extra modules to patch it into. I wanted to be able to have that functionality right there. And that was a real important thing. And I'll even say that as I've been playing with it over the last however many months, I ride the crap out of that decay knob more than anything. You know what I mean? And then having the VCA in there, it kind of lets you play with the dynamics of the sound. You know what I mean? Like maybe you want more of the bass tone, the subtone in there, and less of the wavetable. Or maybe you want the opposite, more of the wavetable and less of the subtone. Or maybe you doing something different with the oscillator altogether, and then you just want to dial back the amount of wavetable that's coming out, even with the plucks. So it's nice to have a separate VCA and a separate decay, even though they're kind of working together. It's nice to have a knob to control both of them, because you get like just so much variation out of that. And it was really important for me to have that within the module, so that, you know, you could use it to get those plucks and stuff. And, you know, kind of selfishly, I was also thinking about it sort of in a retrospective way, so to speak, of the beats that I've already made and the projects or the beat sets that I've already done. I'll often have a separate track with CV, the melody for the Eurorack portion of the beats that I made. So I wanted to be sure to be, and I use a lot of plucks previously, and I'll kind of open the dynamics as I'm performing, open up the notes so that they're kind of droning out a little more, that they're longer notes than just plucks. And I wanted to be able to use Osiris in place of whatever other modules I'd used previously on my live sets. And so I knew that I would have to do that because, previously on my live sets, I would have like a separate modules kind of doing all that stuff. So I just wanted to kind of combine that functionality. And the reality is, it really is, you know, it's all digital, that it really is only two knobs, a VCA knob and a decay knob, that creates that whole thing, rather than having two modules additional.
Sorry, I was muted. So let's talk a little bit about the center knobs. So you do have like the VCA, and you've got that sub mix knob on there, right? And then of course fine tuning. So the idea of being able to mix in your sub, and then you have the VCA level, right? I assume that the way that it was designed, you guys had kind of forethought the headroom involved there. And is that kind of the purpose of the VCA, having its own level control on there? Because that was one thing that when I first, like my initial impression when I first got to it, I was like, okay, so I have this decay knob, and if you turn it all the way right, it's like just like an oscillator. It's just open,
Just fully open. Yeah.
But if you back it off, you have these plucks and all that. But then you also have this VCA level. So I was like, oh, that's interesting about that. Is that for headroom and being able to drive it? Is that just for, again, like you said, like just trying to remove having to use multiple modules to do one thing?
It was a little bit of all of that. We got to a point where we were glad we had those knobs there, because we did run into a problem with headroom, and we had to adjust the firmware a little bit on the sub side. But yeah, I wanted to be able to have a mix and balance almost, because the VCA is basically the volume of the wavetable, while the sub is the volume of the sub mix is the volume of the sub, right? So yeah, I wanted to be able to back those off a little bit and make it a little more subtle if I needed to. And it works well too, because I like to send this through a low pass gate. So I like to send it through a low pass gate, and sometimes it works well with the dynamics to kind of back off the VCA a little bit, and it creates like a nice sort of color combined with a low pass gate. So yeah, it was really about kind of both of those things.
I think what I want to do here is I just want to kind of show people a little bit. Let me see if I turn that thing on. Yeah, this might work. We'll see. Hopefully my dynamic mic won't be too low. I'll try to speak up a little bit. But
Okay.
let me just kind of show a little bit of what I'm doing with it.
Yep.
So can you hear this?
Yep.
All right, and I'm gonna adjust the StreamYard setting so that hopefully this will work. Let's see. Okay, and hopefully you can still hear this okay. So, if you listen to this pattern right here, I'm just gonna mess with the decay a little bit so people can understand that. So you can get like plucks, and I still have a good bit to go. Like I can drop this really short, and then it just becomes like millisecond triggers. And then if I bring it up, and I can go all the way open. And you can hear that I'm really like overdriving a bit here, and that's, let me this is it dry. I was sending it through a convolution reverb from the E520 there. Which, when you're sending plucks, it's always nice to send them to a reverb or a delay, right? So that's kind of what we did. But so if you bring it down like this, and then let's go ahead and do no timbre. So I've just pulled out. I had that timbre set to a CV, and if you do that manually, and that's not even a wavetable, like that's just you're adjusting FM at that point, and you can of course bring this up. And if I bring this all the way down, I'm bringing the waveforms down here, so now it's that sine wave that we're talking about. Drop this back, right? And then we'll bring up that fidelity. So if I, let's see. So we'll just drop everything out, right? And then we can go ahead and do this. Alright, so now we're in that territory of just hearing the module. You can hear the fidelity change. If I bring this up to 12 o'clock, you really hear the variation there. It's not just like noise, it's not just like a bit crusher or whatever. Like you definitely hear that there's more to it than that. And the first thing that I had said to you when I got it in my hands was, hey, it reminds me of my SQ80. Like when you drop the SQ80 really low, you get this kind of like garbled sound out of it, and it was starting to remind me of that old DOC chip, that really dirty, old school lo-fi 8-bit sound.
And that's exactly the kind of idea that we were going for. It's like a classic sampler, classic sort of build.
So now I have the VCA pretty low right now. I can bring this up, and now I'm overdriving. I'm overdriving modules down my chain by doing this, by the way I set my gain staging. And if I drop that sub out, pretty different. Let's go into some thin territory. Right? And then we'll bring the sub back in. So, and it's really like, I've got a subwoofer in here, and like, the sub is very low. Bring it up like this, give it a little bit more saturation. So we have all that flexibility, and that's not even using the tape. And then we bring this in. What's that?
Yeah. Now dialing in that timbre mode on top of everything takes it even further into a whole nother place. Like those waves start to sound different altogether.
Exactly. You really get like a massive change there, and and that's just also like I'm in one bank. There's 4 banks, right? So I'm in one bank, and then on top of that, that's just one of the timbre areas where I didn't even start tweaking. So you have FM, and then you've got varied versions of FM. So it's different ratios of FM, I believe, right?
Yep,
And
it
then
is.
backing off from that, you get these other sounds here. Let's do it like this. So I'm just gonna change that timbre type knob. Take that sub-oscillator out and the VCA back. Fidelity high 5 and go back through a little bit. And it's really crazy that it's not just a switch between each type. Like, if you listen real slow, that's the timbre type knob, not the amount. That's a smooth transition right there, which is crazy. Like, and then I can do the amount. Yeah, that's really wild, man. Like the fact that you can change so much of the sound, in a method that on most modules, that sort of thing would be that would be just a direct switch. Like that wouldn't be. Let me switch my audio again. There we go. So I should.
And that was important too, to be able to smoothly morph through those different timbre modes. Well, it's kind of smoothly scrubbing through everything. Really, every one of those knobs, we tried to go as smooth as we possibly could. And I remember we just kept saying like it's going to be such a smooth module, and not to be confused with like can't be aggressive, but just the morphing aspect of it is very smooth. That was really an important thing too, because it also makes it more performative. It gives you so many tonal options.
Yeah, it's interesting the fact that when you're messing with that kind of stuff, you do tend to think like, okay, well, this is just going to go. But realistically, you can play that smoothly in a set and not have like clicking and popping and weirdness going on. So that's they're little things, but when you're doing them all the time, they start to irritate you, and you start to be like, oh man, I hate hearing this click when I do this, or like it's the little things like that, especially like you said, if you're doing a live set, you don't want clicks and pops coming through a huge PA system.
Yeah, certainly. And I will say, it has the great thing about it. There's even some things that I didn't want to touch that, like, I initially was like, I don't know if I like that, but messing with it is kind of like, no, I like it, leave it. And I'll say what one of those things is, like on the sub, you can smoothly morph from square to what is it, sine to triangle, and into one octave below, right? Negative one octave below. But going from 1 octave below to 2 octave below, there's a jump. There's a clear jump that happens there. But I didn't mind that so much. I didn't even bother to say let's fix that, because I feel like that's fine. It's a sub,
and you need it to. Yeah, you need it to, because if you start, like the only other way to do that would be like a third, a fifth, a seventh, a ninth, something like that. But then you're getting into scaling territories, and and then you've only got so much throw to a knob. It doesn't necessarily make sense for a sub like that.
And then speaking of so much throw to a knob, that was a huge consideration for the X and Y. Right. So for those that don't know, basically what you have is, think of a lookup table like a list, or think of let's see if I could get my camera, because I can kind of illustrate it like this. My top down camera is finicky. So think of it like the rows, this row as a wavetable, each pad being a different waveform, for those that may not know. And then as you going down the column on the y-axis, then you're looking at each one of these as a different wave table, right? So you have 32 wavetables and 32 waveforms in each wavetable, right? Just as a way to visualize it. And if you look at the Osiris Edit on the Osiris Edit manual, you'll see the grid. So that's kind of a depiction of what you're doing when you're scanning through X and Y, right? The initial thought was like, yo, what are we going to do? 8 by 8, 16 by 16, 32 by 32, 64 by 64. And then we're like, ho, we can't do 64 by 64. Yo, the knob is only so big. You know what I mean? Like it would be so fiddly to get like 64 by 64. So we just kind of held off, like, let's not do that. Let's see how 32 by 32 feels, because we were prepared to go down to 16 by 16, but 32 by 32 felt right. And especially if you're using modulation into the CV of the X CV input, but slow CV, so you could kind of get the scan through without sort of missing things. And you could really hear how that wavetable sounds when you're scanning through slowly on the X knob input. So yeah, that was a huge thing for us too. You only get so much space between there. You want to give it enough room that you can hear the difference, even if it is smoothly transferring through or scanning through the waveforms. So Uncle Chrome, are the waveforms single cycles? Yeah, it's basically every wavetable has 32 single cycle waveforms in it. And then you get 32 wavetables. Right. So that's a good illustration of it.
So I do want to say, I got to say it, because like, honestly, the manual is so pretty. Like, like it sounds like a little thing, man. The manual's dope.
Yeah. Synth Dog, he puts his foot in the manuals. I mean, he really does. And to tell you the truth, Synth Dog is has become an important team member to me, really. Because it takes a certain level of understanding at almost like a nucleus, like a molecular level of whatever you're designing, for him to write a manual this well. You know what I mean? And so too, it challenges when he's writing these manuals, because he's there from the beginning throughout, as he's writing these manuals and getting certain things together. Then we're testing together, right? So there's a lot of challenges there that says, does this do that, or does it do this? Why? You know what I mean? Is it doing what you wanted it to do? Because I'm experiencing this on my side. And that's the conversation that we'll have a lot of times. And it just kind of works out really well. And then when I go back and read it, it sometimes even reminds me of like, yep, that's exactly what it needs to do. But then, too, I'll come across, sometimes there's little things that I'll come across and I'll be like, wait, that it don't really operate like that. Is that what you're saying on your side? And so it becomes part of the testing thing too. This thing keeps us honest. And he's so good at the manual, and he's so good at, testing, so that he makes sure he's understanding the feature set so that he can write the manual. And then he's also good at interpreting what I want to see, like that page that you were on where it had the listing of the wavetables and how the grid is laid out. And even the flow of the right there. See that whole chart right there? We went and redid that several times, because it's important to really understand the flow. Like, many people may look at that and be like, I don't want to read that. That's weird. But it's really dope, so that you understand how everything is flowing and what goes where and when happens. If you look at this long enough and you're using this module, you'll understand exactly what's going on.
So you'll notice here that so just to bring this all up, according to this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just looking at it. It looks like the subwave rolls through the fidelity as well. Is that true?
Yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's a very unique thing.
Yep.
That's not something that you oftentimes you'll see, like a sub. A sub is really treated as
A separate thing, an add-on.
Yeah, like we barely had the CPU to do this, but we did this, or like, or it's just, in an analog synth, it's just like, okay, we used a divider and we were able to do this, whatever, right? but the fact that you're processing it and giving that its character as well, like, you
Mhm.
know, and really going that extra step, that's kind of all combines to make it have that, you know, gelled together sound, and
Yep.
like it sounds like one cohesive piece, which
Yep.
is really nice, you know.
Yep.
Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
we had talked about pairings of oscillator, or pairings of filters, excuse me.
Mm.
So I think that that's an interesting topic. When you're using this, are you finding things that you're looking for in filtration to process through? Because that's always a pretty personal choice, but I know you're so particular on your sound.
Mhm.
Um, are you sending through anything in particular that you're liking, and what
I
is it that you look for
absolutely,
when you do that?
yeah, I absolutely love this thing going through a low pass gate. I mean, I mean, and I've sent it through a couple of different low pass gates, and I just love what I'm hearing. Now, there is sometimes when I want to send it through an envelope first and then through a low pass gate and kind of control the dynamics a little bit. But I really love this going through a low pass gate. Right now, I'm using Pinhole by, who's this by? Something Foot. I hate that I'm not remembering the name. It's a module, it's a low pass gate module, a triple low pass gate module uh, called Pinhole, Pinhl. And I don't want to butcher their name, but I feel like the word foot is in it. And I don't want to say like Dusty Foot or something, but like it's something.
Uh, oh, okay. Tenderfoot.
Tenderfoot. That's it.
Okay.
Tenderfoot. I really love using it with Tenderfoot um, low pass gate. And what it is like it's a triple low pass gate. So the first two low pass gates are like, they are the same, but the last one is a little darker. And then each one of them has a switch. So you have a switch that can give you different tones. So I'm literally hitting the switch and I'll hit the switch again. Then I'll hit the switch again. And all that is just me hitting the switch on the low pass gate that it's going through. So I really like it going through that. I've used it also with a ladder filter. So, that's just kind of I love ladder filters. That sound is just, classic, I think. And, sometimes wavetables can have a lot of high-end information, so it helps to have the sub there, but it also helps to put it on a nice filter that might smooth it out for you because you could get totally different sounds out of it. So yeah, low pass gate and a ladder filter or one or the other. I'm loving that combination with both.
Absolutely. So you can see the question up on the screen here. I'm pulling stuff from the chat here.
Yeah, those single cycle waveforms. Yeah, so every wavetable has 32 single cycle waveforms in it. And in every bank, you have 32
And then
wavetables.
it smoothly interpolates between them, right?
Yeah, with the X knob, you can smoothly sort of go from waveform to waveform within a wavetable.
So I'll bring this one up here. Does Corey have any plans for the firmware to allow tweaks like granular stretch stuff or other tricks? Not sure if there's enough memory to fatten the code.
Oh, so the simple answer is no. I don't have those plans, but that's a cool idea. But the key is what you said at the end there. Fattening the code. Is there enough room? Like by setting this to 96 kilohertz and all of that smooth interpolation between the waveforms and smoothly morphing with the timbre modes and being able to have all of that happening at the same time with the fidelity knob, we really had to do a lot of optimization to make this work. And like I remember Ken, you were saying like with the Hydrosynth, you've kind of got that thing where it needs to be. There's room there to do other stuff, but you have to choose wisely, right?
Yeah, choose very wisely. Yep, exactly.
Yes. So that's
I
the
think
similar thing with this. Like we're kind of using that CPU is working, baby.
and I'll just say from a personal perspective on it, whenever I'm talking to you about this stuff, I'm always jumping to the idea of, dude, don't put so much in it that it's like, yes, it's a great feature,
Mhm.
but now I don't know which mode I'm in, and now I
That's
don't
right.
know,
That's
like I have to go to a cheat sheet to figure out,
Yeah, you don't
okay,
want to do
this means this mode and that sort of thing. I like, as much as I love features in my gear, I hate features that I forget. Like,
that. Hmm.
and I'll be the first person to admit, like, yeah, maybe it's first world problems where when you start getting a lot of gear, you're like, oh well, now I have to remember this, that, and the third.
Yeah.
Whereas when you only have like a little bit of gear, you can kind of like like it could have a gazillion modes and you would memorize it all, you know.
Well, that
Um,
depends too, right? Like that could work depending on if you really are gelling with the module. Because I know there's modules
sure.
I've had that had a million modes, and I'm like, listen, bro, I don't know how to do. If you hit the wrong damn button and that thing goes into a mode that you
This thing.
you ain't ready for, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? But yeah, I definitely want to. This to me is pretty much what it's going to be. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? If we start to, as it's getting out there, and you know the holidays are coming around, we're getting orders for these and shipping a lot of them. If we start to see, you know, bugs, obviously we're gonna do updates to squash bugs, but probably won't be much more in the way of features than what's there already. And I think we got really lucky to be able to combine all of that stuff that's there and
I'll
put.
say it publicly. I'll say it publicly. The only thing that just off of initial impression that I'm like, this could be a thing that I'd be willing to be like a little bit of scratching my head on. uh Different quantized scales.
Hmm.
Because I love sending a sample and hold into a CV input and
Yeah.
then having it like pitch things around and
Mhm.
then like saying, okay, I want this to be like C minor or I want this
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
a
yeah.
Dorian or whatever. Like, and just have it like jump to that is fun.
That could make sense, and that's more of an expanding of a
And to
existing
me,
feature.
the other reason why, the only reason why I say that I'm like, okay, I'm okay with that is because I don't use the quantize button all the time because a lot of the times I use a sequencer that's already quantized.
Mhm.
So for me, it's like, okay, these are like special icings on the cake. You know what I mean? They don't ruin me from using the module in any other way. They don't put it into a mode where I'm like, well, now I don't know what control does what. It's
Mhm.
still doing what's intended, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, what's Rich Hilton saying here? Here we go. We'll bring this up here. VFX turn my head around with the wavetables. Um, Yeah, so I mean, to me personally, these the idea of doing wavetables and complex wave shapes in general
Mhm.
with that lo-fi mentality of things like old Sonic gear and whatnot, you know, everything from as is mentioned in the chat here, the Fismo, the
Mhm.
VFX, SQ80, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the EPS, all that kind of stuff was able to do some crazy things, but they all had this like crazy lo-fi-ness about them, and getting that, it's yeah, to me, that's I love my SQ80, but boy, does it take up a lot of room.
Right,
You know what I
right,
mean?
yeah.
So
Yeah, that
getting these sorts of sounds without taking up a huge amount of space is pretty dope. So,
yeah, and to think that it's all there and it's just a knob away, right? You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's
Um, yeah, as we get to, I'm getting ready to close this thing out, but I wanted to just bring up the um, the AES conference
mhm.
and the talk that you had there. Can you just give me a little bit of insight as to that whole
Yeah.
shebang?
So the AES conference, what was cool about it is um I work with
Tell them a little bit about what you spoke on first.
so we talked about developing modules um, with these kind of processes, like these all-in-one processes and developing modules where the cost to entry barrier, the barrier to entry is lower because you have tools and libraries worth of stuff with something like the Daisy that you can build on. And I think it's pretty brilliant that Electrosmith is developing something like the Daisy because it really did enable me to come with my book of ideas and say, I'm going to hang my hat on this platform. So it was all about that the low entry to the low barrier to entry using something like the Daisy to start to develop things and bring things to market. And it's not like it's a totally, but it's a game changer because this is a processor that is purposely built to develop musical instruments.
Mhm.
It's not like it's, whatever the other things that are out there that, they're computers basically, and you
Yeah.
could code on them to make whatever you want to make, whether it's a robot vacuum cleaner or an instrument. You know what I mean? Or whatever it
You
might be.
keep bringing up that robot vacuum cleaner, man.
I love that thing. That thing is like a pet without the mess. That's a pet that cleans the mess.
You're just making me jealous again.
I love that thing. But yeah, it was really, that's basically what it was about. Not have to look at the thing to get the exact title of it, but that was really what it was about. And so there was myself, there was Andrew from Qubit, there was Chris from Noise Engineering, and that's what we talked about. We just kind of talked about our different processes. And so what you have there is you have Andrew from Qubit, who's also co-founder of Electrosmith, with being co-founder of creating the Daisy and this whole library of stuff that you can do to develop instruments. And so it's kind of brilliant, if you ask me. So you have, from that aspect, Andrew was there to talk about the Daisy and say, this is what we developed for this reason. And then you have a more seasoned module developer in noise engineering, and somebody that's doing all the coding and everything in-house and all of that kind of stuff. And then you have me, sort of like newbie, coming into the game as a manufacturer and developer, where the same sort of baseline that they're using, the same processor that they're using to do what they need to do, I was able to come in and say, cool, I want to do this, and work with a developer to kind of work on that platform. And it doesn't matter if we're using C++, because Performer was developed with C++, but it still uses a Daisy as the platform. But then you have Osiris, which is developed using Max DSP, MSP, right? And so that's those are different platform or different sort of environments
But you were able to compile down to the same.
exactly compile and port over into the Daisy, and then build the hardware around these sort of bits and pieces, or features and knobs and stuff, and map knobs and this different stuff. So it really is convenient for me because I work with different developers depending on the module that I'm working up, right? And so it doesn't pigeonhole me to be like, yo, you have to be a C++ programmer in order to make this. And and also it's just like, as I've kind of dipped my toe more and more into Max MSP, I won't say that I'm anywhere near, being a developer, but you know what it does is having that available to me obviously makes it easy to communicate about certain things and understand
Sure.
what's going on up under the hood with this stuff. Cause I'm really, designer, user interface, feature set. That's what I'm all about. And then kind of taking it to market and building it out and making sure that everything kind of stays where I want it to be as far as the specs. So yeah, that was really what AES was about. And so we all just kind of gave a little bit about our company. So think about that. You got the people that develop the platform, you got people that are seasoned developers and code writers that have their own module company, and then you have kind of like a newcomer that, and it was just kind of the whole tier of stuff, and we gave a talk on that and talked about our companies and stuff. And so,
Yeah, I was really happy when I heard about that, so I just kind of wanted to bring that up, and AES members should have access to that stuff, I do believe. So,
yeah, no
but yeah, that, I mean, it's just really dope to see how that's all been progressing, and kind of following how everything is working. It's just like, man, it's brilliant. And it was really interesting timing seeing this happen with S's departure from Electron, and this project really being the next thing for him after what was it, Digitone was his previous major project.
well, Digitone and Model Cycles.
And Model Cycles, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's like, that's pretty awesome. We've got we've got a great question here. I'm going to bring this one in.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, you know it.
Yeah, Ken knows better than anybody. There's our little squad of folks, so we
I'm
constantly
under
talk all
NDA.
day. Right, yeah. And so am I, basically. Like, I gotta keep my own NDA. I want to tell everybody everything, but I gotta, respect the process that I'm going through, right? So yeah, there are new modules that'll be coming down the line.
Say the names.
If I had it my way, I would drop 5 new modules in 2022. But development takes time, and it's not like you develop how you can and what you have the resources for, because I'm essentially a boutique little company here. But there are new modules on the way, and there's going to be some fun ones.
Well, let me ask this, just to kind of press the issue a little bit. Why not? Do you see future work with S?
Yes.
Yeah. So that process worked out well for you, and you're pretty happy about that. Do you see any like future collaborations with other creators and whatnot that people might be familiar with, or anything like that?
Yeah. I still have some unfinished business with Mickey Delp, and you know what I mean. That's
Good
one of
friend.
Yeah, yeah. He's been so busy with the S2400 that we planned on one of my so like I said in the beginning with Performer, my initial plan was to put out 3 modules fresh out the gate. One of those 3 was a module that Mickey Delp was going to be doing the analog circuitry for, the analog design for. And it's probably going to end up being my only analog module. But or it'll be the first of the analog line of modules or whatever it might be. But yeah, so that's one of the things. I won't say exactly what it is, but me and Mickey Delp have some unfinished business, but I don't want to take him away and from S2400. Honestly, as long as I love the S2400, as long as that thing is developing and becoming what it's becoming, if it takes a couple years down the line before we get back around to
You're
it,
just like, I'm still using this.
yeah, you know what I'm saying. So it is what it is.
I feel you on that.
Yeah, but yeah, there will be more collaboration with S, and mostly because we just had a good experience working together. Um, I love the way we volley off of one another, and I love the way he can see my vision and help me bring it to life. You know what I mean? So it definitely seems like there's some really fun stuff on the horizon. Like, I already know what's next with me and him, and I can't wait to share it. So but we're gonna get there. It's gonna be fun stuff. And here's the interesting thing. I actually remember, Ken, we do so many shows, whether it's Beat People or you doing this show or me doing another thing or
Gear Dive
whatever.
Jam and
I jammed. It's like so many different shows. I can't remember which one it was, but there was some show that we were all doing, and somebody said, "Well, S left Electron," and I was like in the comments, like,
I
"Yo, I
remember that. Yep.
should hit up S and see about hiring him to help me develop something."
That wasn't because we had S on the show.
Yeah.
We had S on the show, and we had a great talk with S. S was fantastic guest on the show. I mean,
Yep, he was.
It's. I'll just say that a lot of the times when you have an engineer or a developer, engineers and developers are by and large interesting set of people who tend to have different social structures. So it can be a challenge to have a fluid conversation sometimes, but not with S, man. Like that was a great show, and it went really well, and it kind of spoke to the fact of like, oh, hey, well, like if you're gonna reach out to somebody to develop a module, a oscillator module, that was somebody that you could gel and click with and actually get some work done.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can really speak, and we have a good time. Actually, it's kind of funny because I can remember being in places where he was demoing other products before, and we kind of talk about some of the behind the scenes things that happen right there, and we just have a good time. And honestly, you can really see that we see eye to eye on these creative ventures. You know what I mean? When I'm literally telling him about some fidelity stuff that I want, some lo-fi, and then he's right away like, oh, I've been playing with this Amiga stuff, and you know what I'm saying? Or I say like, yo, I want to be able to, like, I'm showing him something and say, imagine if this was that and this was that, and you could kind of go to these different processing modes, and he's like, oh, well, yo, timbre modes, and you know what I'm saying? So we really, it's a good collaborative effort without a doubt, you know?
Yeah, that's dope.
Yeah, and it's stuff that we try. Some things we try that don't work out, that might be his
That's
idea.
what I like hearing,
That try to
actually,
don't
is
work out,
I
then
like hearing, like,
yeah.
when there's the the ability to fail without, breaking apart. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm,
the willingness to fail is extremely important in success, in my opinion, you
mhm,
know?
mhm. Yeah, you know, for instance, I'll share this piece about um the VCA. There was a point where S added a low pass gate to the VCA. And then I said, "Oh, dope!" Because I already knew that I wanted to use this with a low pass gate, and I was like, "Cool, why not have a?" You know what I mean? But that's also that point when you know, maybe y'all should chill out. You know what I'm saying? Because when I got it, it didn't quite work the way we wanted it to work, and it was more of a hassle than it needed to be,
Mhm.
and it just kind of didn't work out the way you wanted to work out, the way we thought it would work out, and then so we just rolled it back and then kept it moving, and it was fine, and I get what I need out of throwing it into a low pass
I
gate.
will say, with just to touch on that, because, I was aware of that and I didn't wanna get too deep into it, but since you brought it up, I will say that, I don't personally, like, miss that concept, because you had like, the decay works so well.
Mhm.
And with wavetable and timbre mode and all that, you can actually kind of simulate that sort of thing anyway by, like,
Mhm.
dropping back
Yep.
timbre with a trigger, and an
Yep. Yep.
envelope, that kind of, like,
Mm.
there's all kinds of different things, but realistically, like, I haven't e I have some low pass gates in here. I haven't been sending it through the low pass gates. I've been sending it just straight away into some effects like reverbs and delays, and actually the
Oh yeah.
E520 has been my this has been my week of exploration of the E520, and
Oh,
really, like, diving into, you know, slurring and spectral stuff with it. But, yeah, like, the fact that you can pluck things and not just send it straight away is just super useful.
yeah. It and obviously you got a trigger too, but I'm not hearing the
Yeah,
trigger.
yeah, yeah, trigger button, manual trigger button.
Yeah. And so one of the things is I spend a lot of time testing this with Performer because I want to make sure that all of my modules complement one another in some way. Um, and so the reverb on Performer,
That's
so
why I
right
gotta get a second.
now, man, and now through the delay on the Performer.
Hey, how many of those special edition, those limited edition panels you got left?
I think there's only two of them left on the site. And then so now you see that that's going through the Performer, that you have this lush reverb and this really cool delay that you can kind of tweak. The fact that they work that well together, but then now I'm going to add the color adjustment, the color processor with the wax. And you can add some of the fidelity stuff. I mean, they complement each other so well that like it was like one of those kind of eureka moments as I was testing it and thinking like, yo, you could get Osiris and Performer as a pair and have some of the most dynamic fun that you had in ages, because you can add the color processor, you can add the compressor, you can, do all these things and really create some fun melodies and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
So they
Well,
come
listen, I'm gonna tell people right now to go to modbap.com.
word.
You can check out the products on there. You can also, you know, check out any kind of news that's coming up there. The Osiris is listed on the site for sale, so you can buy direct.
Mhm.
You can also get it through distributors as well, I do believe, right?
Yep, you can, and it's in Europe too. I get a lot of questions about like, yo, where can Europeans buy it? It's in Snyder Sladen. It's at um, Juno,
Okay.
Juno UK, and a lot of other
What
places.
about Canada?
I don't know. I need to
Like
look.
Moog Audio or anybody like that?
It may be in Canada. I don't know for sure just yet. I need to look and see where our orders are headed to.
So
But
Osiris is running a 359 US,
yep,
and I know Chuck Levins, I know Perfect
Perfect
Circuit,
Circuit, uh,
who else?
Patchworks,
Patchworks.
and there's a few other. Like if you type Modbap Osiris in Google, you'll see all the stores kind of just
Nice.
pop up, and a lot of that stuff has been like, I think some of the European places shipments are coming slower, but the things have already left the factory. So if you pre-ordered from some other place that's not modbap.com, they'll be getting their shipments pretty soon. So if they
So
have,
yeah, you can get a Modbap case as well. Like he's got
yes,
these Modbap cases which are really dope.
yeah,
Cables, like the right angle 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch cables are a lifesaver. I use a bunch of those in my setup. The cable ties are dope. They've been a lifesaver for me because Corey knows I'm a hot mess at
yo,
all times.
click on the game over edition of the
I
performance.
don't want to, man. Like I'm trying to. Yo, hold one
Yeah,
aside for me, man.
two
Like
and stop.
I'm buying it.
You
I'm
probably
buying it.
shouldn't be
Like
sharing that on your show if you plan on getting more.
I'm buying it. Like I'm so mad at myself because like I need to sell some gear like before I buy some gear, but like I need it. I need it.
Yeah, so I want to mention
It's so
too,
dope.
the great thing about this game over edition is I'll say it's our anniversary edition of it. Um, SynthDog designed this panel and sent it to me as a part of. We were joking about a bunch of stuff, and it came up because of Amiga, the whole Amiga thing and the lo-fi thing that we were talking about on Osiris. And he came up with this design. And I was like, yo, I would love to be able to do that. And then ultimately decided to do it as a 1-year anniversary. It was only 10 of them made, 12 of them actually, one for me and one for Synth Dog for designing the thing. And we're donating part of the proceeds of this particular special edition to AfroRack in Chicago, because they teach synthesis to underprivileged children of color and in my hometown of Chicago. So real special module right there. And it's like I said, there's only a dozen of them made. So you end up with one, you got something, because I'm not probably going to be doing that panel anymore. So yeah, it's real
It's
fun.
so dope. Like, and honestly, like regardless of which version you get, I mean,
Mhm.
it's
'Cause it's running the
such a
same
good module. Like,
firmware, yeah.
I can't stress enough to people like the thing just sounds exactly like what you want it to sound like, and it works so fun. Like, it's absurdly fun. Like, literally, I have it next to my S2400 at all times because I'm like, there's nothing better to send it through. Like it's
Yeah,
just
it's a perfect
it's
pair of
literally
heads.
it, and it works with line level gear as well as modular level. Like you don't need to do anything to it. Like I'm literally like with my S2400, it goes to a patch bay, but it's not being attenuated or anything. Like it's going straight into
That's right.
performer at well, I go through a compressor and then yeah, it goes straight to performer and then back out. And that's it. Like in fact, I think I have it in front of the compressor right now. But anyway, it's
I'm jealous of that compressor too. That's a dope compressor.
yeah, well, it is dope. So deal with that.
Hey, Uncle Chrome was saying, "Wish I could use Eurorack. These are fantastic
You
modules."
can. That's just it.
And
Like
here's the
literally.
thing, with that case, with the
Hold
Modbap
on, hold on.
20
Let me
case,
go back to this real quick because I need people to understand this because listen, I get it. I get it way more than most people do, because understand that when I first got into Eurorack, there wasn't like how-to
There was
websites
no
or any of that.
information.
Like, none of that stuff existed.
Yeah.
I had never even laid hands on it. I knew that I wanted a modular, but before, like, I'm talking, this was maybe 2012 or something like that. Was when I first got in, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, like, there wasn't any of that stuff. So I get the idea of, like, man, I want to get into Eurorack, but I don't want to fall down the rabbit hole, or I hear about this, I hear about that, like the negative aspects of it. Dude, you don't have to. It's literally, if you get something like this case right here, you can just dump the module goes right into it, and then you can plug your line level gear into it using these cables, right? So you get these cables right here, and then you've got 1/4 inch to the 1/8 inch cables right there, and you're done. Like, that's really it. You don't need to sit there and worry about, do I have case power? Do I have this? Do I have that? No, like, you get a performer, you put it in the case, you get these cables,
Hmm.
right? Which are just 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch cables that are just done really nicely. Like, you can use anything, but this, this is just a really nice way of doing it. And this setup here is really nice too. The pretty colors. But
Well, actually, so this is an interesting point. Uncle Chrome says he loves that, but unfortunately, sadly, I'm handicapped, so VCV is my Eurorack experience. That's
Mhm.
dope, and that is one of those things. At some point, I want to be able to, port Modbap modules into uh,
Yeah.
VCV. I just have to kind of get to that point. So eventually, that's part of what I want to be able to do, but I just have to figure out when. That's
Yeah, absolutely. That, and see, that's one of the things where, like, I got the iPad Pro that I keep kind of like right here, and I use
Why do
VCV
you got
rack.
a spool of toilet paper taped to the back of it?
Oh, it's not. It's actually a smart eraser. It's a smart eraser, because the iPad Pro is so heavy for this stand that,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
if I try to make it vertical, it'll slowly go down. So, like, if I need to, I can push it in front like this,
That's
and then it'll stop it from going too far. Because I'm ghetto,
That's freaking innovation. See?
dude. I know, it's called being a cheapskate. But yeah, man, like, so yeah, I use VCV rack, and I would love to see that kind of thing. And I feel like Performer especially could kind of translate in a cool way, because you would have buttons right on the front. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah,
But
yeah, no doubt.
yeah, there is something special about being able to, like, just jack your gear straight into that thing. It's so fun. So,
Totally, totally.
but I won't hog up the rest of your night. It's what, 11:37 here, so that means it's
It's
some sort of
8:30,
time o'clock
37,
there.
and I gotta have a sandwich.
Man, you know what? I just got done eating some chicken wings, and guess what? It's
Ah,
about time to have some chicken wings.
that makes me I'd probably jump in the car and go get some chicken wings now.
I'm
Thank
going I'm going
you.
double chicken wings tonight.
Not the
So,
double chicken wings. Well, I don't even
yeah.
know what that means, but sounds
Well,
like
I had chicken wings earlier, and I'm about to have chicken wings again.
there it is. Double
So,
chicken wings.
and
Okay.
I'm pretty sure Blaze is somewhere waiting for me to beat his ass in Call of Duty. So we'll do that.
No doubt.
But yeah, man, thanks so much for coming on, and
Thanks for having me. It's always a
I'm
pleasure.
so happy, proud, and honored, to be able to sit here and talk with you about this. I mean, it's been a long time coming, seeing this stuff, and
Great.
just watching the brand grow is like, ah, man, it's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, appreciate that, man. And I appreciate you and the squad for being a constant sort of ear for me to yap all this crap into.
Always. Always.
You know
That's
what
what
I'm
we do.
saying?
That's what we
So,
do. So,
yeah,
yeah, if anybody in the chat, like, if anybody, who's watching this video is interested in this stuff, you know how to get a hold of us. Fluxwithit.com. I'll be putting some new content up there very soon. I haven't been putting up sample packs lately, but I have some new stuff that I've been working on really hard. I just don't want to put it out until it's actually, like, properly ready for you. And yeah, Corey, Instagram, Modbap, right?
hmm through so B-Boy Tech Report. That's where I mostly post beat making. That kind of started as me doing reviews and gear and news and all that, but it mostly kind of morphed into me making beats on all the stuff. So B-Boy Tech Report on IG, or if you want to check out Modbap Modular, go to Modbap Modular on IG. And if you Modbap on IG is also a channel of mine, and that's really just curated Modbap beats that I share on there from any of us that are making Modbap beats. So it's like the ultimate sort of Modbap playlist that's it's curated there. So yeah, and be sure to head over to modbap.com and purchase your Osiris and your
And we'll be doing a Beat People show soon too, right?
Yeah, we will be doing the Beat
we got that coming up. And I have another Synth Summit show coming up very soon. Should be Marco from Rossum Electro Music should be coming on the show soon as well. That'll be next up. And also, I started a TikTok account, and my brother-in-law, really the reason why I'm doing this is because my brother-in-law came to me. He's like, I got more TikTok followers. You know, I was like, oh, that's the thing. and so I was like, okay, well now like I'm absurdly competitive at everything I do. So like as soon as he starts like kind of trying to needle me about something, I'm like,
that's just like a brother-in-law.
So if you go on TikTok, follow Flux with it on TikTok, just so I can beat my brother-in-law. That's all I care about, honestly. That's the only reason why I'm doing it.
No doubt.
All right, man. Peace.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all y'all in the chat too. So yeah, peace. Thanks.